Alex Sawyer was last seen early Sunday morning near her West Bend apartment parking lot, walking toward nearby Central Oregon Community College. Her mother says her daughter is very close to her family, and it's very unusual for them not to hear from her for 2 days. They say they are worried sick and just want to get their Kaylee back.
She has four younger brothers who desperately want their big sister home.
Missing 23-year-old Kaylee Sawyer has much of Central Oregon on the lookout. Thousands of concerned residents spent the day putting up flyers and sharing their concern on Facebook.
And we just contacted everybody and said, please get her face out there.
The incoming COCC student and Bend native was last seen at 1 a.m. Sunday near the parking lot of her West Side apartment near COCC.
July 24th, 2016. Somewhere between 1 and 2 in the morning on a quiet street near a college campus in Bend, Oregon, a 23-year-old woman is walking alone. A car pulls up beside her. It looks like a police patrol vehicle. Markings on the side. A uniformed man behind the wheel. To anyone watching, it's the safest thing on the road that night. She gets in. The doors lock. From the inside, they don't open. What happens next will end a young woman's life, expose a security system built on borrowed authority, and change the law in an entire state. But right now, in this moment, nobody knows any of that yet. Nobody even knows she's gone. Bend, Oregon is the kind of place people move to for a slower life. Surrounded by mountains, built around a college campus where students feel safe walking home at night. That sense of safety is about to be shattered, and the person responsible is someone whose entire job was to protect people. Before we go further, a quick note. This video covers a real case involving violent crime and sexual assault. Some details may be difficult to hear. Viewer discretion is advised. Kaylee Ann Sawyer was born and raised in Bend, the oldest child in her family, with 4 younger brothers who looked up to her as their big sister. Her parents divorced when she was young, and both went on to remarry, but Kaylee stayed close to all of them. Mom, Dad, step-parents. In a lot of blended families, that kind of closeness isn't guaranteed. For Kaylee, it just was. Friends and family describe her the same way, almost word for word. Big personality, always smiling. The kind of person who could talk to absolutely anyone. Her mother put it simply. To Kaylee, everybody was a friend, even if they were a stranger 5 minutes earlier. She was the person who made other people feel welcome in a room, who brought energy into a conversation without even trying. She had a creative side most people outside her close circle probably never saw. She liked photography, drawing, and writing poetry. The kind of quiet hobbies that tell you someone notices the world around them, even when they're also the loudest, most social person at a party. And then there was the other side of her, the outdoors side. Bend is one of those towns built for people who love being active, and Kaylee took full advantage of it. Snowboarding in the winter, golfing, fishing, and wakeboarding when the weather turned. If there was something fun to do outside, she was probably already planning to do it. By 2016, Kaylee was 23 and building a life for herself. She worked as a dental assistant in Bend, and she was also a student at Central Oregon Community College, working towards something more. She lived with her boyfriend of 2 years, Cameron, in an apartment near campus. On paper, it was an ordinary life. A job, school, a relationship, a close family nearby. But it was Kaylee's ordinary life, and to the people who loved her, it was everything. That's the person we're talking about today. Not just a name in a headline, a daughter, a big sister to 4 boys, someone's girlfriend, someone everyone considered a friend. On the night of July 23, 2016, that ordinary life was about to take a turn nobody could have predicted. Saturday, July 23, 2016. Kaylee had plans that night, a friend's bachelorette party in downtown Bend. She got ready, headed out, and met up with the group. From there, they did what bachelorette parties do. Bar hopping, a few drinks, lots of laughing. Everyone was in a good mood. At some point during the night, Kaylee ended up dancing with a man at one of the bars. Nothing dramatic, just two people having fun on a Saturday night. But one of Cameron's friends happened to be at the same bar, saw it, and texted Cameron about it. Just after midnight, as the night was winding down, Kaylee called Cameron for a ride home. He came to get her, and almost as soon as she got in the car, an argument started. About the dancing, about the night, about whatever else two people who've had a few drinks decide to argue about. It didn't let up on the drive home. By the time they pulled into the parking lot of their apartment complex, it was still going. Cameron got out of the car and went inside, frustrated, needing space. Kaylee stayed behind, in the car, to cool off. This wasn't unusual for them. During past arguments, she'd do this. Sit by herself for a bit, calm down, then come inside, and things would be fine in the morning. It had worked before. There was no reason to think tonight would be any different. About 10 minutes later, Cameron came back out to check on her. The passenger door was open. The car was empty. Kaylee was gone. He started texting her right away. "Where are you? Please come home. I'm sorry for how I acted. Just come back." She replied. Her phone was about to die. He kept texting, asking her to come back, telling her he'd driven up and down the street looking for her and couldn't find her. Her response was short. Something like, "Are you kidding me right now? Because that's it. Goodbye." And then nothing. Her phone went dark. No more replies. No calls going through. From that moment, July 24th, 2016, just past 1 in the morning, nobody would hear from Kaylee Sawyer again. If a case like this is the kind of story you want more of, this is a good moment to hit subscribe. Because what happens over the next few days turns this from a missing persons case into something that shocked an entire community and led to a law that changed how campus security works across the state.
Dispatch, how can I help you? Hello?
Hi. I'm not sure if this is quite the right number to call. Last night I got home from the bars with my girlfriend, and she got upset at me and ran off. And I chased her and wasn't able to find her, and I still haven't heard from her. Her phone's off. I called all her family and they haven't heard from her, so I'm wondering what you recommend I do.
We can put in a call and we can have officers and deputies look for her.
Okay. Yeah, she was mad at me, so I walked inside and told her to come meet me in there when she's like, calm down. And then I went back out in 10 minutes and she was gone. And I called her a few times and she said she was walking down the street. And then I guess she said her phone was about to die. I haven't heard from her since.
Cameron didn't wait long before he started looking. He drove around the neighborhood, checked the streets near their apartment, went to a friend's house where he thought she might have gone to cool off. Nothing. No sign of her anywhere. He called the people closest to her. Friends, family, hoping someone had heard from her, hoping she'd shown up somewhere safe and just hadn't checked her phone yet. Nobody had seen her. Nobody had heard from her. Eventually, Cameron called 911. He explained what happened. The argument, her walking off, how he'd looked for her and couldn't find her, and that her phone had been dead for hours. The dispatcher took the information and said they'd have officers and deputies start looking. Not long after, Kaylee's mother, Julie, made her own call to police. She gave them Kaylee's name, her age, 23, and one more detail that mattered. She told them her daughter had epilepsy. It's the kind of thing a parent doesn't bring up unless they're genuinely afraid. And it was enough to make sure this wasn't treated as just another adult who'd had a late night and would turn up eventually. Through Sunday, the day dragged on with no word. Kaylee's car was still parked at her friend's house from the night before, exactly where she'd left it, untouched. Everyone wanted to believe she'd gone somewhere to cool off and would surface soon. But as the hours passed, that hope got harder to hold on to. Then Monday morning came. Kaylee was scheduled to work her shift at the dental office. She didn't show up. For everyone who knew her, that was the moment things shifted from worried to something closer to terrified. Kaylee didn't just disappear on people. She didn't miss work without calling. Something was very wrong. Word spread fast. Kaylee's name and photo went up on social media, and within hours, the response from the community was overwhelming. Flyers went up all over Bend. Hundreds of volunteers came out to search, to hand out posters, to do anything they could to help bring her home. Police, meanwhile, were working through the obvious leads. They talked to Cameron, but nothing about his story or his behavior raised any red flags, and he was ruled out early. They also tracked down the man Kaylee had been dancing with at the bar. He was just as confused as everyone else, and just as quickly cleared. Investigators tried to use Kaylee's phone to locate her, pinging its location to narrow down where she might be. But the signal kept bouncing around the city, leading nowhere. It turned out to be an old phone still registered under her name, not the one she'd actually had with her that night. By Monday, with no leads, no sightings, and her family growing more frightened by the hour, this had stopped being a case of someone who needed time alone. Something had happened to Kaylee. Nobody knew what yet, but that was about to change. In a way nobody saw coming.
Just waiting for him to get up so we could start the morning. So he comes out of the room and his eyes were all teary. That's what I'm like, what happened? Tell me what happened. What's wrong? So he sits on the sofa. I turn off the TV. And then he just says that. He's like, I kill a woman, that's what he said. I'm like, what do you mean? Then he's like, I hit her with the car. What do you mean by you hit her panicking? What did you do?
Did he say, I hit her in a panic?
He said, I don't remember exactly the words that he said, but he said like something that he hit her with the car, and then he panicked.
Okay.
So then I asked him, like that's what I was trying for him to explain to me. So you hit her with the car, that's an accident.
Yeah.
Why? What do you mean you panic? What do you mean?
And what did he say?
He just kept saying I panic, and at that point he's already like he got up and he's already like going into the room and walking back and forth, and I'm not really quite understanding what he's telling me. And then I'm like, so what did you do with the body? What? And he's like, I hit. He's like, there's her stuff in the shed.
How did you say it again?
He said something in regards to her stuff is in the shed.
Her stuff is in the shed.
Around the same time Kaylee's case was reaching its breaking point on Monday, something else was unfolding across town. Something that, at first, looked completely unrelated. Isabel was a rookie police officer in Bend. She was also married to a man named Edwin Lara, who worked as a campus security guard at Central Oregon Community College. The same campus Kaylee attended, and the same area Kaylee had walked into early Sunday morning. Isabel had noticed Edwin acting strangely since he'd come home from his overnight shift on Sunday. He was withdrawn, distant, not himself. The two of them went to church together that morning, and even there, something was off. He was quiet in a way that wasn't like him. At one point, she expected him to do something small, hold her hand like he normally would, and he didn't. When she asked what was wrong, he brushed it off. They'd been together a long time, long enough that she could tell something was bothering him, But he wasn't talking. She didn't push. Couples have off days. Monday morning, that changed. Edwin came out of their bedroom, and Isabel could see his eyes were red, like he'd been crying. She turned off the TV and asked him what was going on. He told her he'd hit a woman with his patrol car. He said it was an accident. He said he panicked. At first, Isabel tried to make sense of it the way anyone would. An accident? A car? Something terrible, but understandable. These things happen, especially at night, especially if someone stepped into the road unexpectedly. She asked him what happened to the woman, what he'd done afterward, and that's where his story started falling apart. He kept saying he panicked, but panicking after an accident usually means calling for help, or at least staying at the scene. Instead, Edwin was talking about what he'd done with the body. Isabel asked him directly, "What do you mean? What did you do with the body?" And his answers didn't add up. If this was really an accident, why was he talking about hiding someone instead of getting them help? Then Edwin said something that turned Isabel's confusion into real fear. He told her that some of the woman's belongings were in their shed. For a rookie police officer married to this man, that detail changed everything. This wasn't sounding like an accident anymore. And as those words were still sinking in, Edwin grabbed Isabel's gun and left. Isabel had also heard about the missing Bend woman everyone in the community was searching for. A 23-year-old, last seen near the COCC campus early Sunday morning. The exact area, the exact time frame Edwin had been on shift. The pieces were lining up in her head, and none of them were good. Isabel did the only thing she could do. She went to the police, to her own colleagues, and told them everything. What Edwin had said, the shed, the gun, all of it. What officers found when they searched that shed would turn this from a missing persons case into something far more serious and confirm everyone's worst fear about what had happened to Kaylee Sawyer. Officers moved fast. Based on what Isabel had told them, they went straight to the home she shared with Edwin and searched the shed out back. What they found left no room for doubt. Inside was a white bag. Inside that bag, a purse, a pair of high-heeled shoes, a rock stained with blood, and a clump of hair. The purse and shoes belonged to Kaylee Sawyer. In an instant, this stopped being a missing persons case. This was now a homicide investigation, and the prime suspect was a 31-year-old campus security officer named Edwin Lara. But Edwin wasn't home. By the time investigators connected the dots and moved on his house, he was already gone, driving his own vehicle, armed with his wife's service weapon. The hunt for Edwin Lara had begun, and what police didn't know yet, what nobody knew yet, was that this wasn't close to over. Over the next 2 days, Edwin Lara would leave a trail of violence stretching from Oregon into California and put several more lives in danger before it was finally brought to an end. Edwin Lara left his car behind at his parents' house and kept moving. He made his way to Salem, Oregon, and that's where he found his next victim. 19-year-old Andrea Mays had just finished a 12-hour shift at her job and was sitting in her car in a parking lot, scrolling through her phone before heading home. Edwin walked up, opened the passenger door, pointed a gun at her, and told her to drive. For the next several hours, Andrea drove while Edwin sat beside her with a gun. He showed her photos of himself in his security uniform. He talked about the news coverage of Kaylee's disappearance, the same story that was now spreading across the state. Eventually, Edwin had Andrea pull into a motel for the night. At check-in, he made her pretend to be his girlfriend. Once inside the room, he handcuffed her, made her shower in front of him, and then handcuffed her to the bed and told her to take sleeping pills. That's when Andrea's phone alarm went off. Edwin panicked, accused her of being tracked, asked if it was some kind of signal to police. Thinking fast, Andrea told him it wasn't a tracker. She said she had an STD, and the alarm was a reminder to take her medication. It worked. Edwin backed off. Whatever he'd been planning for that night, Andrea's quick lie likely stopped it from happening. In the early hours of the morning, they were back on the road heading toward California. Edwin's car was falling apart, leaking oil, barely running, and they needed a new one. They stopped at a motel in Eureka, California, where Edwin spotted a man loading equipment into his car. That man was Jack Levy, 73 years old. Edwin approached, gun out, demanding the keys. Levy called for help. Edwin shot him in the stomach. Levy survived. But the gunshot had drawn attention, and Edwin, worried police were closing in, fled on foot with Andrea, leaving Levy's car behind. They made it to a nearby gas station where Edwin carjacked another vehicle. Inside were a 76-year-old woman and her 2 teenage grandsons. Edwin forced one of the teens to drive at gunpoint for a while before eventually letting the family go, unharmed, and continuing on with Andrea. At some point during all of this, Edwin used Andrea's phone to record himself. In the video, he apologized for what he'd done to the girl in Central Oregon and to Andrea's family, saying she was okay and would be fine. He said he regretted killing Kaylee. Then he had Andrea post the video to Facebook. He also called his own family to tell them what was happening. Then, at 6:40 that morning, Edwin called 911 himself. He told the dispatcher who he was, that he was on Interstate 5 and that he was wanted for murder in Oregon. He said he had a hostage with him, a woman named Andrea, and gave the dispatcher her name so they could contact her family. He said he had a gun, but promised not to use it and said he intended to turn himself in. A short time later, a California Highway Patrol officer spotted the car. Edwin didn't stop right away. The chase reached speeds over 100 miles an hour before he finally pulled over. Before officers approached the vehicle, Edwin recorded one more message, an apology to Kaylee's family, and a promise that he would tell them where her body was. Then he handed the phone to Andrea, and the police placed him in handcuffs. 19-year-old Andrea Mize, who had spent the better part of 2 days as Edwin Lara's hostage, was free.
So, like I say, she's still fine. We're driving, and she'll be home pretty soon. I'm sorry to her grandma and her family members, to her boyfriend. I'm sorry everything that I caused. Okay, and you'll see her pretty soon. Okay, tell the cops that not to shoot us, because if they shoot us, then that's not my fault. Okay, but sorry, everybody. From me already?
Yeah.
And yeah, I just want to say I am going to turn myself in.
Okay, where are you at?
Okay, I'm on I-5. I think close to Redding, if I'm right. I am wanted for murder in the state of Oregon.
Okay. Edwin,
Yeah.
where are you at right now? Can you stop?
I am going to stop once I head Redding.
Are you by yourself or?
No, I have someone with me. I kidnapped her in Oregon. She's innocent. Her name is Andrea.
Okay, are you hurt at all, Andrea?
No.
No? Okay. The officer sees you, and are you able to safely stop?
Yeah, I can stop, but not right now. I'll stop in Corning.
What's the difference from stopping now in Corning?
I just don't want to stop right here in the middle of the road, you know, putting myself in danger and putting everybody else in danger, more in danger, I guess.
You know, they won't. They're aware. I'll let them know they won't. But if you can stop safely, they just don't want you to run. They think you're trying to run or anything.
Okay.
Edwin, do you have any weapons with you?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I do have a gun on me. I am not going to flash the gun, so you tell them not to shoot me.
Okay.
No, I don't want to die.
Okay, you stick by your word, though. I'll let them know.
Yeah, I'm going to let them know. You know, don't hurt Andrea. You know, she's a nice girl. I am wanted for the death of Kaylee Sawyer. She was really drunk, and I didn't see her, and I ran her over.
Okay.
She was still breathing, and then she was screaming, and I decided to silence her forever. You want me to throw my gun out of the window right now?
You know, not right now. No, don't do that right now.
All right. I can just give it to Andrea and see if she wants to kill me.
No. You don't want to do that to her and yourself.
Well, basically, or technically, it's illegal to talk on the phone and drive, right?
You know, if you're calling in an emergency, and you know what, this is just a total different circumstance, okay?
Topping your newscast tonight, a day of major developments in the Kaylee Sawyer murder case. A grand jury has indicted former COCC Public Safety Officer Edwin Lara on 4 counts of aggravated murder.
The indictment released today reveals that prosecutors believe Lara kidnapped Sawyer, tried to sexually assault her, then killed her. Authorities say Lara fled to California and shot a man and carjacked 3 people before leading police on a high-speed chase down Interstate 5. And we now know more disturbing details about what happened to Sawyer.
Edwin Lara may now be looking at the death penalty.
Once Edwin Lara was in custody, investigators sat down with him. And at first, he stuck to the same story he'd told his wife. He said he'd accidentally hit Kaylee with his patrol car, panicked, and that things had spiraled from there. But under questioning, that story didn't hold up.
Okay. You want to pick wherever you want. Just tell me where you want to be set. That's fine. I'll sit right here. Okay, thank you. Hello, sir.
Hi,
My name is Sergeant Beckwith. I'm Mac.
wait, I shouldn't introduce myself because he has no names.
We know a little bit, right? All right, so here's the thing. I just want to get to the nitty gritty.
I do, but I want to get home first.
Because I don't think you're a bad guy, right? I think that things have spun completely out of control, sir. Sir, am I right? Okay.
And you know this, man.
A man wants to do a man.
So before, can I say the story what happened first?
Yeah, as you're drawing, please, or whatever you'd like to do, sir.
Let's do that first.
I want us to get you out of that stuff.
Highway from, yeah,
Okay, but you ask if we can get him out of the stuff so we can draw.
highway from Redmond to Salem, that's 120, right?
I think it's 126.
126.
What happened, man? What happened? Like the straight up, what happened?
So I was putting the signs up where there was an event going on.
It's a college.
Cyclist event or whatever. So I was gonna turn south on the do not enter area there. And I didn't see her, she was wearing all black. So I was in a hurry, so it was my fault. And I wasn't expecting anybody, you know, at that time of night, so I just turned and I mean, I didn't hit her that hard. I just bumped her with the patrol car, bumped her with the front rack. And she fell down. And at first I thought, you know, first thing I was, oh, I killed her, you know, but I didn't hit her that hard. So I got off the car and she was really drunk. And then she looks at me and then she started screaming.
She started screaming at you.
She did. So I panic and I just grab her by the throat and told her, shut up, shut up, shut up. So she passed out. I put her on the back of the patrol car, drove her up the B12 lot, and then I was panicking. I didn't know what to do. She already seen me, she saw my face. So I opened the door, and that's when she came back. She started screaming again. After that, I dragged her body behind a tree there, and I hit her with another rock. And that's when I think she died, because I heard her breathing her last breath.
And we're finally getting to the real problem here. We really are. Is you knew she was never getting out the car the moment you shut that door. Well, let me finish. You need to let me finish, right? Because I know this, okay? Because you said you were a hooker. She's like, no. Immediately, you go to give me your purse and your phone.
Well, I knew she wasn't going to get out.
She wasn't gonna survive that encounter, was she?
No.
Because you can't rape her and let her live, can you?
And she can't make a phone call if you have it.
I wasn't going to rape her.
Well, you can't let her live.
Edwin, we're missing something here, man.
Look, yeah, I know what you guys are thinking, and it makes perfect sense. It does.
Because
why would you ask for her purse? What was in your head that made you want her purse?
Because, you know,
just in case she had a gun, she could defend herself.
She was gonna use her phone
to call 911. Call for help.
So, but listen to this. According to your story, this is where it does not make sense. If your intent isn't already there to do some kind of harm or some kind of evil to her, some friggin' evil that's there, bro. It's there. You just gotta face it down, man. You can't cower away from it. You face that damn thing down right now. If you know the only way, if you don't have intent in her head, your thought is, I gotta keep that phone away from her because she's gonna call for help before anything bad's even happened. You've already made a decision. Am I right or am I wrong? Tell me.
So I made the decision at that time to silence her.
To kill her. Let's be real. When you say silence her, you mean kill her. Is that correct?
Okay. Because
when did you make that decision?
When she started screaming. Because she had seen my face.
But you already grabbed her phone. You already kept her away from making a call for help or contacting someone. So you're already preserving yourself. So I'm thinking it's before. When you ask for the purse, I think you already know in your head, I'm going to silence her. I'm going to kill her. The sound that you heard after the strike of the first rock, before you hit her with the second, is agonal breathing, and you know this. It's the sound of life leaving her body. It's the sound of the life God breathed into her, leaving her, and her life being no more, going away, being done. It's the sound of everyone loving her, mourning. It's the sound of her blood crying out from the friggin' earth. Right? You know this. It's Cain and Abel. No. No. You know what it is? You need to hear it though. Okay? I respect you enough, Edwin, at this point, that I've asked you for detail, and now I'm going to give you my own. Okay? Those are the cold hard facts. Does God still love you? Will He forgive you? Will He bring you back into His heart? Will He? Questions you have to answer for yourself. But the truth of the matter is that her blood cries out, man. That her life is gone. It will never be replaced. The truth of the fact is this. What you mistook for a hooker was an absolute angel. Was the apple of her mom and dad's eye. Was the breath that they breathed, that they spent and cultivated all their life raising and growing. And she is gone forever with your semen all over her. That's the truth, man. Okay? It's brutal. It's hard to say. It's hard to sit in here, but you got to face it before you can look your God in the eye and ask for that forgiveness and be able to receive it.
I think all throughout my life, I have struggled with somehow the urge to kill.
Is this addressed to Dad?
Yeah, the last one is for COCC.
Okay. I think it would play pretty well on recording if we read this out loud. It might show some of your emotion. Might show.
Want me to read it?
I would love you to read it. Thank you, sir.
I've been trying to ask Katie for forgiveness, but I don't think her soul hears my crying because God doesn't allow the devil to talk to angels. However, I know Katie hears you, and if you find it within your heart, please ask her to forgive me. Please, I beg you. Please. I know that I will spend the rest of my life asking God to forgive me, but I don't think He will. Sir, this is directed to her dad. I am not sure what your name is, but I know for a fact that you love your daughter, and they, like me, don't have a heart. Please forgive me, Spirit. Please forgive me, and please ask your wife to forgive me too. I fail you. I fail my community. I fail everyone, including my family. I am really sorry.
Piece by piece, Edwin's account changed. He eventually admitted that he had strangled Kaylee and that she died from being struck in the head with a rock. This wasn't the accident he'd first described. It was something far more deliberate. With Edwin in custody but Kaylee's body still missing, investigators searched the car he'd abandoned back in Salem before taking Andrea hostage. Inside, they found handwritten notes, including one that pointed to where Kaylee had been left. Using that information, police located her body off a remote stretch near Highway 126. There was, however, a major complication. During his interrogation, Edwin had asked for a lawyer, and that request wasn't honored before questioning continued. Because of that, a judge later ruled his detailed confession inadmissible. It couldn't be used at trial. For prosecutors, this was a serious setback, but the physical evidence, what was found in the shed, what was found in Kaylee's apartment, the items recovered from his car, and the location of her body, was strong enough to move forward without it. Facing the possibility of the death penalty, Edwin Lara took a plea deal. He pleaded guilty to aggravated murder and robbery in Kaylee's death and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Later, in a separate federal case for the kidnapping of Andrea Mais, he received a second life sentence to be served alongside the first. At his sentencing for Kaylee's murder, the courtroom was filled with people who loved her. Her mother spoke about who Kaylee was, not just to her, but to everyone who knew her. Other family members spoke too about what her loss had taken from them, and from a community that had spent days searching for her, hoping for a different outcome. Edwin Lara would spend the rest of his life in prison, but for Kaylee's family, that was never going to be the end of the story. Part of what made this case so disturbing wasn't just what Edwin Lara did. It was how easily he was able to do it. Campus security vehicles at Central Oregon Community College closely resembled real police cars. The uniforms looked similar to Bend police uniforms, too. Officers carried pepper spray, wore body cameras and ballistic vests, and drove vehicles equipped with cages in the back, just like a law enforcement vehicle. To Kaylee, getting into that car probably felt no different than accepting a ride from an actual officer. It later came out that the college had been warned about this. An internal safety audit had flagged these exact issues before Kaylee's murder and recommended changes. Those changes were never made. Kaylee's family filed a lawsuit against the college, arguing that this setup, combined with inadequate background checks on Edwin Lara, created the conditions that allowed this to happen. In 2022, the case was settled for $2 million. But money was never really the point. What came out of this case was Kaylee's law, passed in Oregon in 2019. Under Kaylee's law, campus security vehicles and uniforms now have to look clearly different from real police. No more ambiguity, no more vehicles that could be mistaken for law enforcement. Patrol cars require GPS tracking and interior cameras that activate whenever someone gets in. Background checks and psychological evaluations are now required before hiring campus security officers, and campus security can no longer pull people over or stop and search them, powers that should have never belonged to them in the first place. In the years since, Kaylee's family has also kept her memory alive in a more personal way. They started something called KK's Readers, named after Kaylee's childhood nickname, which donates copies of Oh, the Places You'll Go to preschool classrooms across Central Oregon. It was Kaylee's favorite book growing up, and it's part of what inspired her own love of writing and poetry. Her mother summed up who Kaylee was best. She said that the moment she first held her daughter, she understood what love at first sight really meant, and that Kaylee would continue to live on, in the memories everyone who knew her continues to share. This is the case of Denise Hallowell.
Check this 911. What is the address of the emergency? 4419 Southwest 4th. I need someone here immediately right now. Okay, tell me exactly what's happening. Okay. Oh my God. Okay.
July 13th, 2019. Inverness, Florida. A quiet lakeside town where not much ever happened. Until today. At 6:15 in the evening, a 911 call comes in. On the other end is a 17-year-old boy. His voice is shaking. He's telling the dispatcher that his mother is in her bedroom, that she's gasping for air, that there is an axe buried 3/4 of the way into the back of her skull. When emergency responders arrive at the lakefront home, they find 57-year-old Denise Hallowell lying on her side in her bed, barely clinging to life. They attempt CPR, but they can't even turn her onto her back because of the angle of the weapon still lodged in her head. Within minutes, Denise Hallowell is pronounced dead. Her son Carlos, the one who made that call, tells deputies he was asleep in his room when it happened. He says the sound of the dogs barking woke him up. He says the front door was wide open. He says he has no idea who could have done this to his mother, but as investigators begin to dig into the life behind these walls, they will uncover something far more disturbing than a break-in. The real danger in this home didn't come from the outside. It had been growing inside for years, and the person Denise Hallowell loved and trusted most in this world was the one who would take her life. Before we continue, this video covers a real crime involving real people. Some of the details in this story are disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. Our thoughts remain with Denise Hallowell and everyone affected by this tragedy. Denise Hallowell knew what it meant to grow up without a family. She was adopted as a child, and that experience shaped everything about who she became. She understood the loneliness of waiting for someone to choose you, and she carried that understanding with her for the rest of her life. For generations, Denise's family had retreated to their property in Inverness, Florida, a peaceful stretch of land sitting right along the lake. It was where Denise spent her childhood summers, fishing off the dock, swinging from a homemade rope swing over the water, running through the trees with the neighbor kids. One of those kids was a girl named Amy Alford, about 5 years younger, who looked up to Denise like a big sister. The two of them would stay close for the rest of Denise's life. As she got older, Denise earned a teaching degree and built a career in education. She had a gift for connecting with young people. Colleagues respected her. Students gravitated toward her. The people who knew her described her the same way: warm, loving, sweet, and completely devoted to the children she worked with. She eventually became a teacher in Marion County, specializing in working with children with autism. But there was one thing Denise wanted more than a career, and that was a family of her own. After 2 marriages that didn't work out, she made a decision. If building a family the traditional way wasn't in the cards, she would do it on her own terms. In 2006, Denise traveled to Guatemala and adopted a 4-year-old boy named Carlos. She was giving him the same chance someone had once given her, a permanent home with someone who would never walk away. In her own words, Denise once said she was a forever mom. She believed that every child deserves a good home, a forever home, and she intended to be that for Carlos. And for a while, it worked beautifully. Friends of the family described Carlos as Denise's golden child. He was charming, athletic, and sharp in the classroom. Denise set up a college savings account for him. She paid every bill. She showed up to his football games. They traveled together, took vacations together, and built what looked to everyone on the outside like an enviable life. Her friend Amy admitted she was jealous of how naturally they bonded, especially compared to her own challenges raising adopted daughters. By all appearances, this was exactly the success story Denise had set out to create. Eventually, Denise made the decision to adopt again. She wanted Carlos to have a brother, someone to grow up alongside. She brought home a boy named Angel from Honduras. He was around 8 years old. Denise hoped the 2 boys would form a bond, but those close to the family say Angel was troubled from the beginning. The sibling connection Denise envisioned never materialized. Instead, Angel was prone to intense outbursts of rage and repeatedly ran away from home. What was meant to complete the family would instead begin to tear it apart. On the surface, Denise Hallowell was a single mother doing everything in her power to hold a family together. But beneath that surface, something was fracturing, and it was about to blow wide open. If you're finding this story compelling, take a second to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss the rest. Now, back to the story. In 2015, the life Denise had carefully built began to crack. Her younger son, Angel, now 12 years old, ran away from home again. It wasn't the first time. Denise called 911 to report him missing. Deputies found the boy hiding in a neighbor's shed. But when they went inside the Hallowell home, what they discovered shifted the focus entirely. Angel's bedroom door had been bolted shut from the outside. His windows were nailed closed and boarded over. The room itself was nearly bare. An air mattress on a metal frame, a few books, and a bucket for him to use as a toilet. When caseworkers sat down with Angel, he told them Denise had been physically and verbally abusive. He said she would slap him when she got angry. He alleged that both Denise and Carlos had hit him. He had bruising on his hips and arms and scratches on his face. Denise was arrested. Her mugshot ran in the local papers. The school system she had devoted years to forced her to resign. Both boys were removed from the home and placed in foster care. The woman who called herself a forever mom was now sitting in a jail cell, accused of abusing one of the children she had promised to protect. But Denise's attorney mounted a strong defense. He argued that what investigators saw inside that room looked horrific on the surface, but it had context. Denise had kept detailed journals documenting Angel's behavioral issues. The explosive outbursts, the running away, the aggression. The defense argued that Angel was showing signs of a condition called reactive attachment disorder, a serious and widely misunderstood condition sometimes seen in children who experienced early trauma or disrupted caregiving. Denise, they said, had consulted with doctors and her local pastor before resorting to the extreme measures in that room. She claimed she slept outside Angel's door at night to keep him safe, that the bucket was only there in case of emergency. The judge took the defense seriously, explored the possibility of RAD, and ultimately, charges were never formally filed. Denise was cleared. Carlos, who was about 13 at the time, had stood by his mother through all of it. He tried to post her bail. He told caseworkers directly that every allegation against his mother was false. but the damage had already been done. Professionals determined it wasn't in Angel's best interest to return to Denise's care. She agreed to surrender her parental rights. Angel became a ward of the state, and according to her friend Amy, Denise never brought his name up again. She simply stopped talking about him. Reports later indicated that Angel's subsequent foster homes experienced the same behavioral difficulties Denise had described all along. Denise tried to rebuild. She secured a new teaching position working with autistic children. She focused on her dogs, her home, her remaining son, but with Angel gone, the spotlight landed entirely on Carlos, and what it revealed was troubling. By age 11, Carlos had started drinking. Over time, it escalated. Harder drugs, more dangerous company. He was selling substances from the wooded area near their home. Neighbors noticed cars pulling in and out at odd hours. Animals in the neighborhood started disappearing. One neighbor's cat was found cut in half on the lawn. A chicken was found dead with a hammer embedded in it. Looking back, some of those neighbors quietly wondered if Carlos had been responsible all along. He destroyed a pickup truck his mother had bought him. He was expelled from his Christian school in January of 2019 and managed to hide it from Denise for 5 full months. When she finally found out in May, it crushed her. She cracked down on everything. His friends, his habits, his freedom. Carlos had also attempted to take his own life more than once. After one of those attempts, he was placed in a facility, diagnosed with bipolar disorder and depression, and put on medication. The people around him said the medication seemed to genuinely help. He was calmer, less volatile, more like himself. But it wouldn't last.
Denise Hollowell may never fully have her life back, but she is just anxious to clear her name. This is really a story of the justice system, relying on evidence and witnesses and ultimately finding an accused woman to be without blame. It is what she's been trying to prove from the very beginning. For 5 months,
situations are not always what they seem.
Denise Hollowell's life has been in limbo.
She'll never be the same person because in the back of her mind, we've rattled this woman and this family's foundation.
It started last September with a 911 call. Her youngest of 2 adopted sons was missing. Citrus County deputies found the 12-year-old hiding in a neighbor's shed.
He begins to tell them how he didn't eat, punished with food, he's abused by his mother, he's locked in his room for hours on end. These things are patently false.
But deputies arrested her, calling it one of the worst cases of child I've seen in a very long time. At face value, it sounded awful. Both her children were taken. She lost her job as a teacher, all the while trying to explain her son suffered from behavioral and anger issues. Sometimes a lock was the only thing keeping him from running away.
He is troubled. I had logged 3 years worth of behavior on my youngest son as trying to manage this and take notes. I offered that immediately on that day. That was also ignored.
The accusing child was placed in foster care, but soon came reports of violent outbursts, that he struck the foster parent and threatened to accuse him of child. Based on his behavior and willingness to make false accusations, the state attorney's office said it's unlikely a jury would find the defendant guilty beyond a reasonable doubt.
The government didn't null pros or drop the case. They never filed it.
Hollowell was cleared.
It's been a total of 5 months, and a nightmare for 5 months.
Pictures of Hollowell's sons tell a very different story. There were fishing trips, raise games, and vacations.
I am a forever mom.
While her legal troubles are gone, she faces a new battle. Google the name Denise Hollowell and you'll see the damaging headlines. For now, she carries this piece of paper, proof that accusations don't always mean guilt.
Don't be quick to judge, and that's exactly what happened here.
In May of 2019, Carlos left his mother's house and moved in with a couple he was close to, Stephanie and Damian Irving. He seemed more stable there. The environment was more relaxed, and his medication appeared to be working. But Denise kept showing up for conversations that quickly turned into arguments. Stephanie recorded some of these exchanges, heated confrontations where Denise demanded money from Carlos, accused him of owing her hundreds of dollars, and expected him to contribute to household repairs despite being a minor without a steady income. Stephanie pushed back, asking Denise whether Carlos was her son or her husband, because she was getting confused. In one of those recorded moments, Denise told Carlos that if she hadn't adopted him, he would still be standing at the border with everyone else trying to get into the country. People close to Carlos said that remark cut deeper than anything she ever said to him. In another conversation, Stephanie watched Carlos break down sobbing, telling his mother that he had tried to end his life and that she kicked him out when he needed her the most. Denise didn't hug him, didn't acknowledge the tears, just stood there. Eventually, Carlos considered going home. He sat down and wrote out a pros and cons list. On the con side, his mother might disown him, she would be crushed. He could lose help with college. On the pro side, stability, freedom, help, and guidance. He told Denise he would come back, but only if she agreed to a notarized list of demands, including paying for a vehicle, housing, and living expenses. On June 12, 2019, just over a month before her death, Carlos moved back in. The fighting didn't stop. Neighbors could hear the screaming matches through the walls. Whatever calm had existed at the Irving household was gone. The situation inside that lakefront home was escalating, and it was heading somewhere no one could pull it back from. By the summer of 2019, the people closest to Denise were starting to see signs that something terrible was coming. The problem was, Denise either couldn't see it herself or refused to. She started having quiet conversations with the people she trusted. She pulled her friend Amy aside one day and asked her, very seriously, to make sure her dogs were looked after if something ever happened to her. It wasn't a passing comment. Amy understood the weight of what was being said. This was a woman who was preparing, even if she wouldn't say out loud what she was preparing for. Her friend Adele noticed injuries. She confronted Denise about them directly, asked her point blank, "Tell me the truth. Did Carlos do that to you?" Denise insisted she fell. Adele didn't buy it. She kept pressing. Denise wouldn't admit it to her, but she did eventually tell another friend, Peggy, what actually happened. Carlos had pushed her with enough force to leave her with a broken wrist, a broken arm, and a concussion. These weren't accidents. These were violent outbursts from a teenager who was getting physically stronger and emotionally more volatile by the month. Denise knew the danger was real. She went as far as installing CCTV cameras inside her own home. Not because she was worried about intruders, because she didn't trust the person living under her roof. She was surveilling her own son, sleeping in a house where she felt she needed cameras rolling just to feel some measure of safety. And still, she stayed. She kept cycling through the same pattern. The blow-up, the separation, the guilt, the reconciliation, and then back to the beginning again. Despite the broken bones, despite the fear, despite telling her friend to plan for a future without her. Denise could not bring herself to let go of Carlos. She had promised herself she would be a forever mom. She had promised him. And for Denise, that promise meant something she was willing to risk everything for, including her own life. The people who loved her could see it. They could feel the situation getting worse. But nobody could make Denise walk away from the only person she had left. The morning of July 13th, 2019 started like any other day for Denise and Carlos. They got dressed, got in the car together, and drove to St. Petersburg to attend the funeral of a family friend. Mother and son, side by side, paying their respects. On the way home, they stopped and picked up a pie. Back at the lakefront house, they sat at the kitchen table and ate slices straight out of the box. No plates, no silverware. Denise was a single parent living on a teacher's salary. They stretched everything. That was just how life worked in that house. By around 3 in the afternoon, they went their separate ways inside the home. Denise went to her bedroom. Carlos went to his. This was their routine. A few hours of separate time, quiet space apart from each other. It was the only way the two of them managed to coexist under the same roof. But according to Carlos's later confession, an argument had erupted that day, either in the car on the ride home or once they were back at the house. It was about his future. Carlos wanted to attend a vocational school. Denise wanted him in a 4-year university. He claimed that when he pushed back, she snapped. That she threatened to stop paying for his education entirely. That she called him worthless. A disappointment. That she told him she never should have adopted him. Carlos said he went outside to the shed. He had an axe out there that he regularly used to chop wood. It was his way of burning off anger, but on this afternoon, he didn't chop wood. He sat there and sharpened the blade. Phone records would later reveal that Denise's cell phone was plugged into its charger at 3:12 p.m. and disconnected at 3:45 p.m. According to Carlos's own words, he walked back into the house carrying the axe. He said he intended to get a glass of water. Instead, he walked into his mother's bedroom. Denise was asleep on her bed, completely vulnerable. Carlos said he looked away and swung. He described hearing her gasp for air afterward. He told her he was going to get help, but he didn't get help. Instead, Carlos ripped the 3 security cameras from their mounts inside the house. He grabbed his mother's cell phone. He walked down to the lake behind the property and threw everything into the water. Her phone was submerged at approximately 6:18 p.m., and only after all of that, after destroying every piece of evidence that could show what really happened inside those walls, Carlos Hallowell picked up his own phone, walked back toward the house, and dialed 911.
Yes, 911. What is the address of the emergency? 4419 Southwest Point. I need someone here immediately right now. Okay, tell me exactly what's happening. Okay. Oh my God. Okay.
I hear barking from my side of the house, which is abnormal. Our dogs are supposed to be in that little fenced-in area. So the front door was wide open. So went to go find the dogs, checked around the property, looking for them. I couldn't find them, so I went to go wake my mom up and help me find them, and then I found her there.
So what did you see when you walked in your mom's room?
It was our axe in the side of my mom's room, and I could still hear her trying to.
Within hours of Denise's death, Carlos was sitting in an interrogation room at the Citrus County Sheriff's Office, and from the moment he opened his mouth, something felt off. He told detectives he had been asleep in his room when the dogs started barking. He said the sound woke him up, and when he went to check, the front door was wide open. He walked into his mother's bedroom and found her lying there with the axe. He said he didn't know anyone who would want to hurt her. She kept to herself. She had no enemies. They lived in the middle of nowhere. It was a clean story, almost too clean. And the way he delivered it raised immediate red flags. Carlos was remarkably composed for a 17-year-old who had just discovered his mother with an axe embedded in her skull. He was calm, articulate, steady. There were no tears, no trembling, no shock. He spoke like someone recounting something that happened to a stranger. Then his story started to shift. At first, he said he couldn't hear anything from his room because he had background noise playing while he slept. Minutes later, he mentioned hearing his mother walk out of her room to get water. Detectives caught the contradiction immediately. He couldn't have heard nothing and something at the same time. When they pressed him on it, he tried to walk it back, but the damage was done. Every time he added a new detail, his earlier version fell apart a little more. When detectives pointed out how rare it is for a stranger to walk into a home in the middle of nowhere and attack someone in their sleep, Carlos turned defensive. He told them, "Aren't you the detectives? Aren't you supposed to figure this out?" One investigator looked at him directly and told him his behavior was consistent with sociopathic traits. Carlos pushed back, insisting he loved his mother, that he was adopted at 4, that he had been with her forever. But the detectives didn't have enough physical evidence to hold him. He was 17, still a minor. They had no choice but to release him. What followed over the next 9 weeks was almost as revealing as the interrogation itself. Carlos needed a place to stay. He was first sent to his girlfriend Kayla's family, but they grew uncomfortable and asked him to leave. He was then placed with Denise's friend Amy, the same woman Denise had asked to look after her dogs. Amy took him in, but privately, she was terrified. She kept wasp spray next to her bed at night in case Carlos tried to harm her while she slept. The people around him started noticing things that didn't sit right. Carlos wasn't grieving the way you would expect someone to grieve after losing their mother. One friend recalled him talking casually about inheriting Denise's property, her cars, her land in other states. The friend remembered him saying something along the lines of, "It sucks what happened, but I can't wait to get the land and the cars and all that stuff." And yet, his private journals painted a different picture. Pages filled with entries about missing his mother. Doodles of the words mother and son. Photographs of Denise tucked into the journal's pockets. It was as though 2 versions of Carlos existed at the same time, one performing grief when it suited him and one expressing it only where no one else could see. Meanwhile, at least one friend grew suspicious enough to start secretly recording conversations with Carlos. In those recordings, he didn't sound like a grieving son. He sounded like someone calculating how much evidence existed against him, coaching people on what to say if detectives came asking questions. Detectives also briefly considered the possibility that Angel, Denise's younger adopted son, had returned to take revenge. It was the most obvious theory, a bitter child cast out of the family, coming back to settle a score. But that lid died quickly. Angel was just 15 years old and was believed to be incarcerated at the time of the murder. He was cleared almost immediately. That left one person, and the evidence was about to catch up with him. While Carlos was busy settling into his new living situation and talking about inheriting property, detectives were quietly building a case. During their initial search of the Hallowell home, investigators had noticed something that didn't add up. They found security camera manuals sitting in plain view. They found mounting brackets. They found cables. But the cameras themselves were gone. 3 of them. And when they looked at the surfaces where those cameras had been sitting, the dust told the story. There was a fine layer of dust covering everything in the area, except for the clean outlines where the cameras had recently been removed. Someone had taken them, and they had done it recently. Detectives ordered a dive team to search the lake behind the property. It didn't take long. In shallow water, not far from shore, divers recovered all 3 security cameras and one more critical piece of evidence: Denise Hallowell's cell phone. Whoever killed Denise hadn't just taken her life. They had tried to erase the trail. The cameras themselves were waterlogged and didn't yield any usable footage from the day of the murder. But the real breakthrough didn't come from what was on those cameras. It came from the phones. Denise's phone data helped investigators tighten the timeline. They could see when her phone was plugged in, when it was unplugged, and when it was submerged. But the evidence that shattered Carlos's story came from his own device. GPS data pulled from Carlos's phone showed that he was actively using it the entire afternoon. He was never asleep. And at the exact moment Denise's phone and cameras were being thrown into the lake, Carlos's phone placed him right there at the water's edge. He was walking toward the lake at the same time he was on the phone with 911. 9 weeks after the murder, detectives brought Carlos back in. This time they came with everything. They placed a box of evidence on the table: the recovered cameras, the phone data, the GPS tracking. They laid it out piece by piece and watched the composure drain from his face. Carlos tried to hold the line at first. He said he panicked after finding his mother and threw the cameras into the lake out of fear. When detectives asked why a grieving son's first instinct would be to destroy surveillance equipment, that explanation collapsed. Then they showed him the GPS data from his own phone. The proof that he never took a nap, that he was moving through the house, moving to the lake, moving back, all within the window of the murder. His entire story, the one he had told for 9 weeks, was done. Carlos shifted. He admitted he went to the shed, admitted he grabbed the axe, admitted he sharpened it, but he claimed he blacked out after that. He said he remembered the axe in his hand, and then, suddenly, it was in the back of his mother's head. He said he didn't remember the act itself. When detectives pushed for more, he gave a fuller account. He said he walked back inside carrying the axe. He said he went into her bedroom where she was sleeping. He looked away. He swung. He watched her gasp for air. He told her he would get her help. And then, instead of getting help, he ripped the cameras from the walls, grabbed her phone, and walked down to the lake. And then came the detail that revealed everything about who Carlos Hallowell really was. After confessing to the murder of his own mother, he asked the detectives how long the whole process was going to take. He said he hoped the situation wouldn't affect his plans for college.
One of the things that my mom's has done, and I just get the frustration out of that. I'm like, okay, mom said this. I visualize what she said in a paragraph. And just beat. How long are we going to be here?
I know it's longer. Next week, I'll take that.
Okay, so take me
You go to our jail here and transfer for Ocala.
to jail?
Yeah. The jail here is just for processing. You go to DJJ up in Ocala.
So I don't have a record now.
Oh, you didn't have a record. You don't know what happened. But you have a reason for what happened?
Well, no, I mean, like, is there any way of getting it explained later?
That's worked up the courts. I don't have things against it, but it's up to the courts.
I just hope that this doesn't really affect too much, because it's still college.
It's all up to the courts.
Carlos Hallowell was charged with premeditated first-degree murder and tried as an adult. Despite having sat in that interrogation room and told detectives exactly what he did, Carlos pleaded not guilty. His defense team argued that he was a deeply troubled young man, shaped by abandonment, bipolar disorder, and a toxic home environment that pushed him past his breaking point. They painted the killing as an act of emotional rupture, not calculation. The prosecution told a different story. They laid out the premeditation step by step. Carlos retrieved the axe from a locked shed. He spent roughly 30 minutes sharpening the blade. He waited until his mother was asleep and at her most vulnerable. He carried out the attack, then methodically removed every piece of surveillance from the home and destroyed the evidence. Then he called 911 and performed the role of a grieving son. That is not impulse. That is a plan. In July of 2021, nearly 2 years to the day after Denise's death, the jury found Carlos guilty of premeditated first-degree murder. 2 months later, on September 14th, 2021, he stood before Circuit Court Judge Richard Howard for sentencing. He was 19 years old. The judge had heard 2 days of testimony, including psychological evaluations from both sides. Experts agreed that Carlos met 16 out of 20 recognized criteria for psychopathy. One evaluator described him as disarming but extremely dangerous. The judge declared Carlos an incorrigible offender with no realistic possibility of rehabilitation. And then the judge named the motive plainly. This murder, he said, was not the result of a sudden emotional outburst. It was the culmination of Carlos's desire to acquire his mother's property, her cars, and her other assets. He waited until she was asleep. He sharpened the axe quietly in his room, and he carried out exactly what he intended to do. Carlos was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Because he was 17 at the time of the crime, he was ineligible for the death penalty, but his sentence will be eligible for review in 2044. Before the bailiffs took him away, Carlos took a microphone into his cuffed hands and spoke directly to the mother he killed. He told her he was deeply sorry, that he missed her, that he loved her. He asked the judge for justice for his mom and mercy for himself. He showed little emotion when the sentence was read. He simply shook his head gently as he was led out of the courtroom. In a later interview from prison, Carlos said he accepts his punishment. His words were simple. You take a life, you owe a life. At the end of all of this, what stays with you is Denise, a woman who was adopted as a child and spent her entire adult life trying to give someone else what she was given, a home, a family, a chance. She called herself a forever mom, and she meant that with everything she had. Even when the signs were everywhere, even when the people who loved her were begging her to walk away, she held on. This case doesn't leave you with neat answers. It leaves you with questions about how we fail, families who are struggling behind closed doors, about a disorder most people have never heard of, about warning signs that everyone could see except the one person who needed to see them most. Denise Hallowell gave everything she had to the person she loved most in this world, and that person took everything from her. She was 57 years old. This is the case of Kenya Monge.
I feel like I'm going to die without her. 2 days ago, Kenya Monge's family came forward begging for help.
Miracles do happen. I've seen them happen.
But now it's been almost a week since this 4'11", 90-pound girl disappeared from this downtown Denver nightclub, leaving behind all her possessions.
It's a nightmare.
The police spokesman says they just met with the family, now too distraught to talk. The case is serious enough that investigators have brought in outside help, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children and the FBI Safe Streets Task Force.
Some of the facts of this case got our attention right away, and we began putting resources into it, and as we followed leads, we became more concerned.
Earlier this week, Kenya's stepfather told us a, quote, good Samaritan had come forward, saying he picked up Kenya near the club the night she disappeared.
He told her that he lived not far from there, so he would take her home.
He says the good Samaritan claims to have dropped her off at this gas station on Spear in Pennsylvania with another man. That's the last place police say she was seen, but officers won't confirm that story or any details of the investigation. While detectives are working it 24/7, the family's clinging to hope that Kenya is still alive.
Yes, she's very strong and beautiful, and she had a good heart too.
March 31st, 2011. Denver, Colorado. A father walks into a gas station parking lot knowing two things. His daughter is missing, and the man standing in front of him knows exactly where she is. He extends his hand for a handshake, and the moment their palms meet, he feels it. A tremor. Not in the man's body, not in his arms, not in his face. Just his hand, shaking like the ground beneath him was splitting open. Tony Lee would later say that in that moment he knew with complete certainty that he was shaking the hand of the last person who had seen Kenya alive. He smiled. He lied. And for months, he almost got away with it. Because while detectives chased dead ends, while a family fell apart waiting for answers, this man was scrubbing a white cargo van with so much bleach it dripped from the ceiling like rain. He was burning her clothes in an alley behind a bakery. He was sitting across from a news camera on live television, nodding yes while his mouth said no, then blaming a 19-year-old girl for her own disappearance. And when the pressure finally got too close, he ran. Then he struck again. And this time, his victim survived. This is the story of Kenya Monge, a teenager who walked into a nightclub on a Friday night and never made it home. Of Travis Forbes, the man who took her, the man who almost vanished into the cracks of a broken system. And of the father who refused to stop looking, the detective who refused to give up, and the woman whose survival finally brought the whole thing crashing down. Denver, Colorado, a city that knew how to have a good time. Lower downtown, Lodo, as the locals called it, was the heartbeat of the city's nightlife. On any given Friday night, the streets came alive with energy. Music spilling out of open doors, neon signs cutting through the dark. Groups of friends moving between clubs like the night had no end and no consequences. It was the kind of place that felt safe because it felt familiar, because it was always full of people, because nothing bad was supposed to happen here. The 24K lounge sat right in the middle of all of it. a popular downtown spot, the kind of place where being young and wanting a good time was basically enough to get through the door. And on the last night of March 2011, that's exactly what a group of young women were counting on. This was 2011. Smartphones existed, but they weren't glued to every hand the way they are now. Social media was still finding its footing. Security cameras existed around the city, but the coverage was inconsistent. Gaps everywhere, blind spots in the most important places. And when it came to adults who went missing, the system moved slowly. Dangerously slowly. In Colorado at the time, when a grown adult didn't come home, police departments weren't rushing to act. The unofficial standard was to wait. Give it time. Maybe they just needed space. Maybe they'd turn up. It was a mindset that would cost one family everything. In a city this alive, nobody notices when one light goes out. Before we continue, this video discusses the kidnapping, sexual assault, and murder of a real person. Some details may be distressing. Viewer discretion is strongly advised. Her name was Kenya Monge, 19 years old, 5 feet and 1 inch tall, 90 pounds, the kind of person who walked into a room and immediately made it warmer. Kenya was born in Honduras, and at 12 years old, her world shifted completely. Her mother had already made the move to the United States a few years earlier, building a new life in Colorado, marrying an American man, starting fresh. When Kenya finally joined her, the family grew to 5. A new country, a new home, a new chapter, and Kenya embraced all of it. She settled in Aurora, just outside Denver, and she didn't just adapt, she thrived. By the time she walked across the stage at Cherry Creek High School, she'd already started mapping out what came next. She wanted to work in TV production. She was drawn to storytelling, to cameras, to the idea of being behind the scenes of something that mattered. She was ambitious in the quietest, most determined way. The kind of person who didn't just dream about a future, but actually moved toward it. People who knew Kenya described her the same way every single time. Responsible. Reliable. The one you called when things went sideways because she always knew what to do. She barely drank. Going out was something she did occasionally, not habitually. She wasn't chasing the nightlife. She was just a young woman who worked hard and studied hard and sometimes wanted to dance with her friends and forget about the week for a few hours. That was it. That was all any of it was supposed to be. She had her people. Her sister Kim, who she talked to constantly. Her boyfriend, her parents Tony and Maria, who knew her routines, her check-ins, the unspoken rule that she always let someone know she was okay. That was just who she was. Kanaya didn't disappear without a word. She didn't leave people worrying. The people closest to her knew that without ever having to say it out loud. That Friday night, the last night of March 2011, was nothing special. No big occasion, no celebration. Just a girls' night out after a long week. The kind of night you plan in a group chat on a Thursday afternoon and don't think twice about. Except the night didn't go exactly as planned. When Kenya and her friends showed up to their first stop, the bouncer took one look and turned them away. No entry. So they moved on, ended up at the 24K lounge with a smaller group, girls Kenya knew, but not her closest ones. Not the ones she had the unspoken agreements with. Not the ones who operated by the stay together, leave together rule without needing to be reminded. That distinction seems small. It wasn't. Inside the club, Kenya was doing exactly what she came to do. Dancing, laughing, finally switching off after a week of work and studying. Nothing about that night felt dangerous. Nothing about it felt different from any other Friday. She was a 19-year-old girl in a busy club in a city full of people, doing what 19-year-olds do. Nobody in that building had any idea that within a few hours, she would be gone. If you're watching this for the first time, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss what comes next. Hit the like button and turn on notifications. It genuinely helps more people find stories like this one. Now let's keep going. Around 1 o'clock in the morning, Kenaya Monge walked away from her table and never came back. No goodbye. No, I'll be right back. She left everything behind, her purse, her phone, her ID, sitting right there on the table like she had every intention of returning. Her friends waited. They looked around. They assumed she had stepped outside for some air, maybe gone to find someone she knew. Eventually, they packed up her things and left. They figured she had found her own way home. She hadn't. Security footage from a nearby apartment lobby picked her up a short time later, and what it captured stopped investigators cold. The girl on that screen barely resembled the responsible, grounded young woman that everyone who knew Kenya described. She was unsteady, disoriented, moving in a way that didn't make sense, reacting to things around her in a way that felt completely disconnected from who she was. Her father, Tony, watched that footage and said immediately that something was wrong. Detective Nash Gurul, the veteran Denver investigator who would later take over the case, said the same thing. Both of them believed without hesitation that Kenya had been drugged. And when you understand how these substances work, that assessment makes complete sense. Drugs like Rohypnol and GHB, the ones most commonly associated with this kind of attack, don't announce themselves. They dissolve into a drink without changing the taste, the color, or the smell. They take effect fast, sometimes within 15 to 30 minutes, and what they do to a person from the outside looks almost identical to someone who has had too much to drink. Slurred speech, loss of coordination, confusion, and inability to make clear decisions. From across a crowded room, nobody looks twice. That's exactly the point. Crowded venues, loud music, dim lighting, these are not just the backdrop. For predators who operate this way, they are the tools. Kenya barely drank. The people who knew her said it over and over. What that camera captured that night was not a girl who had too much. It was a girl who had been targeted. The footage shows her wandering outside, unsteady, alone on the street in the early hours of the morning. And that is when Travis Forbes appeared. 31 years old, driving a white cargo van through the streets of lower downtown Denver in the middle of the night. He would later tell police that he simply noticed a young woman who looked like she needed help. That he pulled over out of concern, that he was just trying to do the right thing. But here is what the evidence would eventually make clear. Travis Forbes was not a man who stumbled into that moment. He was not a good Samaritan in the wrong place at the right time. He was circling. He knew exactly what a vulnerable, disoriented young woman alone on a street at 1 in the morning represented to him, and he moved toward it deliberately. Kenya got into the van. Vulnerable, confused, with no phone to call anyone and no real sense of what was happening around her. She got into that van because her ability to protect herself had already been taken from her before she ever left that club. What happened next, Travis Forbes would not confess to for months. But when he finally did, every word of it was worse than anything the family had allowed themselves to imagine. Travis Eugene Forbes was 31 years old, born in Fort Collins, Colorado, and by the spring of 2011, he had built himself something that looked, from the outside, like a legitimate life. He ran a small business. Forbes Gluten-Free Foods, he named it after himself, operated out of a rented space inside a local bakery in southeast Denver. He made granola bars, handled his own deliveries, moved around the city in that white cargo van like any other small business owner trying to make something work. To people who didn't know him well, he probably seemed unremarkable. A guy trying to get by, a guy finding his footing. But Travis Forbes had a history, and it told a very different story. His first run-in with the law came when he was 17 years old. From that point forward, the record built steadily and relentlessly. Burglary, shoplifting, assault, trespassing, parole violations, disturbing the peace, domestic violence. By the time Kenya Monge disappeared, he was not just a man with a past. He was a man actively on probation for domestic violence. He was not reformed. He was not a cautionary tale about someone who made mistakes and turned things around. He was in the middle of it, and the criminal record was only part of the picture. People who worked around Forbes described a man with a hair-trigger temper that could detonate without warning. He shouted at co-workers. He berated people over small things. On one occasion, he walked outside and beat his own van with his bare fists in a fit of rage in front of everyone. This was not someone who struggled to control his emotions on hard days. This was a pattern, a way of moving through the world that said the rules applied to everyone else. Then there were the lies. Forbes was a compulsive fabricator in a way that went far beyond the occasional exaggeration. He told people he was a Marine, that he had been dishonorably discharged after refusing a second tour of duty in Afghanistan because he had killed a civilian. He told people his mother was dying of advanced cancer and that he was her primary caretaker. He told people he owned his own home. None of it was true, not a word of it. And what makes that significant is not just the dishonesty. It is the effortlessness of it. These weren't small, convenient lies. They were elaborate, sustained performances designed to control how people saw him. Forensic psychologists who study this profile will tell you that what you are looking at is not a man who snapped one night. You are looking at someone with deep-seated control issues, a consistent pattern of targeting people in vulnerable positions, and an absolute refusal to be held accountable for anything. The anger, the lies, the escalating criminal history. These are not isolated chapters. They are a progression, a man who had been moving towards something for years. His girlfriend at the time gave him an alibi for the night Kenya disappeared. She said he arrived at her place in the early hours of the morning and was there until the next day. She was certain of it. His phone records told a completely different story. The morning after Kenya disappeared, her boyfriend was the first to notice something was wrong. He reached out to her sister, Kim. Kim hadn't heard from her either. Kim called their father, Tony Lee. That was all it took. One phone call and Tony Lee was on high alert. He knew his daughter. He knew her routines, her check-ins, the way she moved through the world. Kenya did not go silent. Kenya did not leave people wondering. Whatever explanation existed for where she was, it was not that she had simply decided not to come home and not tell anyone. Tony started making calls immediately. He reached her friends, and what they told him only made everything worse. She had left her purse at the club, her phone, her ID, everything she walked in with, still sitting on that table where she had left it. That was when her friends dropped her belongings off at the house. Tony went through her phone. He was looking for anything. A name, a message, something that pointed somewhere. And he found it. A text message, sent the evening after she went missing, from a number nobody recognized. It read, "Hey, this is Travis, the guy in the creepy white van. Did you get home okay?" Tony started calling that number. Over the next 24 hours, he called it 20, maybe 25 times. It rang out every single time. No answer, no callback, just silence on the other end, from a man who had apparently been the last person to see his daughter. And while Tony was doing all of this on his own, the system that was supposed to help him was telling him to wait. In Colorado at the time, when an adult went missing, police departments operated under guidelines that prevented them from launching a formal investigation, issuing warrants, or taking significant action until a waiting period had passed. Tony was told there was nothing they could do yet. His daughter was 19. She was an adult. He needed to give it time. Tony Lee did not give it time. He kept calling. He kept digging. He kept building a picture of that night hour by hour, detail by detail, entirely on his own. And then, nearly 48 hours after Kenya vanished, Travis Forbes finally called back. His story went like this. He had been driving through lower downtown late that night and noticed a young woman on the street who looked disoriented, like she needed help. He pulled over. He offered her a ride. She got in. On the way, she asked him to stop at a gas station so she could get a cigarette. At the gas station, she spotted a man smoking nearby. The two of them started talking. They walked off together. Travis said he watched them go, decided everything was fine, and went home. That was it. That was the last he saw of her. Tony listened to every word of that story. Then he said, almost to himself, that it was the most fantastic thing he had ever heard. Not one word of it made sense to him. Not a single part of it matched anything he knew about his daughter or about that night. He called Travis back. He told him he had questions. He wanted to meet at the gas station. Travis agreed. Tony Lee showed up to that meeting with a 9mm pistol tucked into his waistband. His wife, Maria, knew what he was walking into. She called the police. Officers arrived at the gas station before anything could happen. They allowed Tony to speak with Travis, to hear the story again. Travis told it exactly the same way, word for word, with a few apologetic additions for the officers' benefit. And then he offered Tony his hand. Tony shook it. When our palms met, I felt it immediately. Not in his body, not in his arms, just his hand, shaking like the ground was opening up underneath him. And I looked at him and I knew. I was shaking the hand of the last person who saw Kenya alive. The officers, now aware of the situation, agreed to check the van. They opened it up. There was no immediate evidence of a crime, no visible signs of a struggle, nothing they could point to and act on, but the smell hit them the moment the doors opened. Bleach. Overwhelming, saturating bleach. Not a light cleaning smell. Investigators later described it as the kind of concentration that drips down surfaces, that soaks into material, that tells you someone wasn't tidying up. They were erasing. Bleach destroys DNA. It breaks down biological evidence at the molecular level, eliminating the traces that forensic investigators depend on. It is one of the most commonly used tools in violent crime cover-ups, precisely because it works. But it also communicates something that no innocent person's van should ever communicate. Whoever used that much bleach knew exactly what evidence looked like and exactly what they were trying to make disappear. The officers noted the smell. They had nothing to hold him on. Travis Forbes walked away. Tony drove home. He pulled into his driveway and sat there. Inside that house were his wife Maria, his kids, Kenya's sister Kim, all of them still holding on to hope, still believing she was going to walk through the door. And Tony knew in a way that sat in his chest like a stone that she wasn't coming back. He couldn't say that. He couldn't walk in there and take away the one thing they all still had. So when he needed to fall apart, he drove to the Walmart parking lot. He parked at the far end, far away from everything, and he let it out. Then he bought a pack of gum so he had something to show for the trip, and he went back home and kept being the rock. And in the hours that followed, while his family held on to hope, Tony Lee drove through the alleys and side streets of Denver alone, checking dumpsters, looking in the places nobody wanted to look, searching for his daughter's body, hoping more than he had ever hoped for anything that he was wrong about what he already knew. Detective Nash Gurul had been with the Denver Police Department long enough to know when something was wrong before the evidence could prove it. He took the case, and from the moment he was assigned to it, he moved fast. Missing posters went up across lower downtown Denver. Kenya's face appeared on walls, in windows, on telephone poles throughout the neighborhood where she was last seen. The details were stark and simple. 19 years old, 4'11", 90 pounds, last seen leaving the 24K lounge. Her purse and phone left behind. The city started paying attention. Gurul's team pulled every piece of surveillance footage they could find from the surrounding area. What they found on a camera from a nearby apartment building confirmed what Tony had suspected from the beginning. The girl on that footage was not behaving like someone who had too much to drink at a club. She was moving in a way that investigators recognized immediately as consistent with someone who had been drugged. Disoriented, unsteady, completely unlike the responsible and grounded young woman that everyone in her life described. It was unrecognizable to her family, and to Gurul, it was a critical piece of the picture. Then the bakery owner called. She had been reviewing her own security footage and noticed something that unsettled her enough to pick up the phone. The footage showed Travis Forbes arriving at the bakery after hours, after every other employee had gone home. He walked into the office, went directly to the surveillance recorder, and unplugged it. Then he came back with a cooler, sealed shut with black duct tape, loaded it onto a small cart, and wheeled it into the walk-in freezer. He had never used that freezer before, had never brought anything in to store there. And yet every time another employee wandered near the freezer that day, Forbes would follow them in, watching, hovering, making sure nobody opened that cooler. When Gurul went to the bakery, the cooler was already gone. Behind the building, in the alleyway, they found a barrel. Inside it, the remnants of something that had been burned. Fabric, material, ash. Nothing identifiable. Nothing that could be directly tied to Kenya. But combined with everything else, it painted a picture that made Gurul's stomach turn. He brought Forbes in for an interview. What struck investigators about Travis Forbes in that room was not nervousness or defensiveness. It was the opposite. He was calm, almost performatively calm. He answered questions with the relaxed manner of someone who believed he was smarter than everyone in the room. At one point, he turned to Gurul and asked, with genuine curiosity, what the detective thought of him. Gurul looked at him and told him exactly what he thought. That he was a creep, that he was a jerk, that he was a monster. Forbes considered that for a moment. Then he asked, almost academically, whether Gurul thought he was a psychopath or a sociopath. It was the kind of question that stays with an investigator, not because it was threatening, but because of how detached it was, how clinical, as if they were discussing someone else entirely. But Gurul had nothing he could hold him on. The DNA sample they collected from Forbes didn't match anything in the database. The barrel had been burned clean, no prints, no DNA. The bleach in the van was suspicious, but not criminal. Every instinct Gurul had was screaming, and every piece of physical evidence was silent. He had to let Travis Forbes walk out of that building. What happened next, nobody saw coming. Forbes went on live television, apparently deciding that the best way to handle being the prime suspect in a missing person case was to go on camera and declare his innocence to the entire city. He sat down for a television interview that his family watched together, gathered around the screen, hoping to feel something other than what they had been feeling for weeks. What they watched instead was one of the most revealing performances of guilt ever broadcast on local news. Forbes denied everything, but while his mouth was saying no, his head was nodding yes. It is one of the most well-documented tells in deception research. When the verbal and physical responses are in direct conflict, the body is almost always telling the truth. He stumbled over Kenya's name mid-interview, as though the name of the girl he claimed to have tried to help required a moment of retrieval. And then, in the moment that made Kenya's entire family lose the ability to sit still, he looked into the camera and said that Kenya had made her own choices, that she chose to walk off with that other guy, and that he couldn't blame himself for that. The deflection was so complete, so practiced, that it almost sounded reasonable in the moment. That is exactly how it is designed to sound. Shifting responsibility to the victim, performing visible remorse, using the language of helplessness. These are not accidental choices. They are techniques. Ways of reframing a narrative so that the person asking questions starts to feel like the unreasonable one. Kenya's family watched every second of it, and they fell apart. Gurul called Forbes back in to take a polygraph test. Forbes agreed. He set a time. He confirmed he would be there. He never showed up. Instead, Travis Forbes got in a car, and left Colorado entirely.
Travis, this is Detective Gruen. Let's go with Travis for them.
She put her arm through his arm, like while they were sitting there smoking, and they spoke Spanish, and they walked off, and that's it. That was it, and I went home.
And that's the last you see of her?
Yes. If she had made the choice to go back home or to get in my van, I would have taken her home. Like, I would not. I mean, and if I had felt any sort of weirdness about her walking over that guy, I would have done something.
I mean, it's been 2 weeks. Nobody's heard from her. There's been no trace of her. Like, it's surreal. I don't even know what to think of it.
Since you're a person of interest, let me ask you this. Did you do something with her?
No.
Did you kidnap her?
No.
Did you sexually assault her?
I did not.
Did you murder her?
I did not. No. No, and having that on you, having that energy on you is very stressful. Man, I'm sorry that I was indifferent, that I didn't think anything. I didn't think anything. I didn't think she was gonna disappear. I could have walked with them. I could have been like, no, I'm gonna take you home, and I could have intervened more, and not just said okay, and gone home, What's her name? Kenya, yeah.
Did you murder her?
I did not. No.
While Denver detectives were trying to track down a man who had vanished, Travis Forbes had quietly slipped back to where he started, Fort Collins. His hometown, about an hour north of Denver. He moved in with his grandparents, kept his head down, and by all outward appearances was simply a man who had returned home. The Denver detectives knew he was there. They had even reached out to the Fort Collins department to flag him as a person of interest. For a brief period, they kept eyes on him. Then, believing he was staying quiet, they pulled back the surveillance. They would regret that. On the 4th of July, 2011, Fort Collins was doing what the rest of the country was doing, celebrating. Fireworks lit up the sky over the city, crowds gathered in the streets, and 30-year-old Lydia Tillman was among them. She was a wine company executive, sharp and accomplished, someone who had built a career that had taken her places. She had recently made the decision to give up a rare professional opportunity in Spain to come home to Fort Collins. Her father had been diagnosed with cancer, and for Lydia, there was no real decision to make. Family came first. She came home. That night, she watched the fireworks with friends, and when the evening wound down, she walked home alone. Travis Forbes followed her. He pushed his way into her apartment, and what he did inside that building was savage in a way that is difficult to sit with. He beat her, he raped her, he strangled her, and left her on the floor, convinced she was dead. Then he did what he always did. He reached for the bleach. He soaked her body and drenched the apartment, then set the building on fire and walked out. But Lydia Tillman was not dead. Somehow, through injuries that would have ended most people, she found enough consciousness to understand what was happening around her. The smoke, the flames, the heat closing in, and she made a decision. She threw herself out of the second-story window and landed on the concrete below. A neighbor noticed the fire and forced his way into the building, shouting for anyone who might still be inside. Emergency services arrived within minutes. Detective Jacqueline Shackley, assigned to the case, found Lydia behind the building, beaten beyond recognition, no clothing, running on pure survival instinct toward the ambulance that had just pulled up. At the hospital, the full picture of what had been done to her became clear. Her jaw was crushed, her eye sockets were shattered, her wrist was broken, her ribs were cracked. On top of the physical trauma, Lydia suffered a massive stroke, and doctors placed her in a medically induced coma to keep her alive. When her sister Esther arrived at the hospital, she stood at the bedside and did not recognize her. The only way the family could confirm it was Lydia was by a tattoo on her body. She could not speak. She could not answer questions. She could not tell Shackley a single thing about what had happened or who had done it. So Shackley followed her instincts and made a phone call to Denver. She described the scene to Gurul. A young woman, blitz attacked in her own home. Beaten, assaulted, left for dead. The apartment soaked in bleach. The building set on fire, and the location, Fort Collins, the exact city where their prime suspect in the Kenya Monge case had gone quiet. There was a long silence on the line. Then Gurul said it. "Oh my God, this is him." Shackley sent a forensic team to the hospital immediately. The bleach was a problem. Forbes had used it on Lydia the same way he had used it on everything else, trying to erase himself from the evidence. But this time, it wasn't enough. Lydia Tillman had fought back. Hard. And underneath her fingernails, the forensic team found exactly what they were looking for. Foreign DNA. Enough to matter. Enough to potentially end this. The only question now was whether the results would come back in time. The DNA results were going to take time, and time was the one thing nobody could afford to waste with Travis Forbes walking free. Detective Shackley kept her team on him. Undercover officers moved through the party district of Fort Collins at night, watching him, tracking where he went and what he did. What they observed made their decision very easy. Forbes was not keeping a low profile. He was hunting. Night after night, he was drifting through the streets, watching women leaving bars alone, following them as they walked home, closing the distance with the quiet patience of someone who had done this before. On one of those nights, an undercover officer stepped in and engaged him in conversation. At some point, the officer asked for his name. Forbes gave a false one. "Travis Kennedy," he said. It was enough. They arrested him on the spot for providing false information to a police officer. It was a minor charge, the kind that carried a small bond and a fast release. But it got him off the street while the clock on the DNA results kept ticking. Forbes bonded out. The paperwork was being processed. His release was minutes away. And then Shackley's phone rang. The DNA from under Lydia Tillman's fingernails was a match to Travis Forbes. Every prayer that had been whispered over the previous weeks landed in that single moment. Shackley called Gurul in tears. The words were simple. "We did it. He is not getting out. He is done." Forbes was charged with attempted first-degree murder. There was nowhere left to run. Something shifted in Travis Forbes after that. Whether it was the weight of the evidence, the realization that the walls had completely closed in, or something else entirely, he stopped performing. In jail, he told investigators he wanted to talk, that he wanted to confess, that there was more he needed to say. But on his terms, his condition was one thing. He did not want to be labeled a sex offender in prison. He understood what that meant for the years ahead of him, what it would mean every single day behind bars. He wanted it off the table. In exchange, he would give them everything, a full confession, and Kenya. The district attorney agreed. No death penalty. No sex crime charges on his record. In return, Travis Forbes would plead guilty, confess completely, and lead investigators to where he had buried her. He took Gurul to Keensburg, a small rural area about 40 miles outside of Denver. Flat land and open sky, a grove of trees sitting beside the road. Forbes walked them to a spot on a slight hill and stopped. He looked down and said it plainly. "She's right there. You're standing on top of her." And then in the interview room with the cameras running and detectives on both sides of the table, Travis Forbes told them what happened that night in full. He said he picked up Kenya, knowing she was vulnerable and disoriented. He drove with her until she lost consciousness. He sexually assaulted her while she was unconscious in the back of his van. She regained awareness. She realized what had happened. She started hitting him, fighting back with everything she had in her. He hit her back. She screamed, and he strangled her until she was gone. He put her body inside the cooler. He drove to the bakery, went inside, burned every piece of her clothing, poured bleach over everything she had touched, sealed the cooler, and put it in the freezer. He drove out to Keensburg in the early hours of the morning and buried her under the trees. He chose that spot, he said, because it was next to something natural, because that is where he would want to be buried if someone had done this to him. And then he said something that nobody in that room expected. He had left his credit card inside the grave. Not as a trophy, not as a taunt. He said that if her body was ever found, he deserved to be caught. That some part of him had placed it there as a quiet admission that what he had done could not simply disappear the way he had tried to make everything else disappear. Gurul sat across from him and absorbed all of it. Then Forbes leaned forward and said that Gurul had never given up, that no matter what he did, the detective had never stopped coming. Gurul looked at him and said simply, "You're right." Tony Lee received the call from the district attorney shortly after. They had found Kenya. He sat in his truck in silence for a long time before he could move. Before he could drive home and walk through the door and look at his wife and his children and take away the last thing they had been holding on to since the night she disappeared. Hope. He had carried the truth alone in parking lots and alleyways for months so they could keep it a little longer. Now it was gone. And the grief that had been waiting on the other side of that hope came for all of them at once.
Send me to Texas because they think we're going to Mexico.
Oh, they do in Mexico. And you...
Get a tan? Did you do anything there?
No.
Sure?
No. We never touched.
At all?
Not even a hug. And I usually hug people.
So did she have sex with you?
Nash, I think at this point, my lawyer should be present.
He stopped talking, but they did get his DNA. Then, on the stolen car charge, they brought him back to a Denver jail.
I did not mean to kill her. I didn't pull over to kill her. I didn't pull over to rape her. None of that was in my head. None of it was premeditated. I wanted to bury her either next to some water or next to some trees.
Why is that?
Because that's where I would like to be buried. If somebody had killed me, I would hope that they would bury me next to something nice. I just dumped me in some dumpster.
So you find this spot. Why did you pick there?
Because of the trees.
Okay. And how long do you think you dug for?
It wasn't very long. I was actually surprised. I was worried that it was so late that I wouldn't have enough time.
Okay.
But I dug that hole fast.
Were you actually inside the hole?
Yeah.
And that's why you were able to tell me that it went shoulder depth.
I left my credit card inside the hole.
Why did you do that?
It was not that I wanted to get caught. It wasn't like I was trying to brag that I did it. Because I knew that if it was ever going to be found, holy shit, dead body, credit card. And those credit cards have embroidered lettering on them. I just figured it was right. I figured that if you found the body, that I should be caught.
Travis Forbes stood in that courtroom and pleaded guilty to first-degree murder. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. For what he did to Lydia Tillman, he received an additional 48 years on top of that. He will die inside a cell. That part is settled. Before the sentence was handed down, Forbes addressed the courtroom. He spoke about the person he used to be. He asked the people who knew him to remember him as he was, not the monster he became. He said it was a mistake, that he didn't plan it, that he took a life. Kanaya's family sat in that room and heard every word. They were unmoved. Because there is a difference between remorse and performance, and by that point, they had watched Travis Forbes perform for months. But then, something happened in that courtroom that nobody was prepared for. Lydia Tillman had been discharged from the hospital just 2 days earlier. She was still recovering from injuries that had nearly killed her, still rebuilding the basic functions that the attack had taken from her. She could not yet speak in the way she wanted to, so her father stood beside her and read her victim impact statement aloud to the room. He read every word she had written, and at the end of it, he looked up and delivered the line that stopped the entire courtroom. Cold. Travis Forbes, I forgive you for what you did to me. There was not a dry eye in that room, son, not among the family, not among the investigators who had spent months hunting him, not the attorneys, not even the judge. A woman who had been beaten beyond recognition, who had thrown herself out of a burning building to survive, who had woken up from a coma to find her body broken in ways that would take years to heal, had chosen, 2 days out of a hospital, to forgive the man who did it, not for him, for herself, because she refused to carry his hatred inside her for the rest of her life. After the sentencing, Kenya's family finally got to meet Lydia properly. Two families bound together by the worst possible circumstances, standing in the same space for the first time. Kanaya's sister Kim walked up to Lydia and hugged her, and something broke open in her chest that she hadn't expected. She said afterward that in that moment, holding Lydia, it felt like holding her sister, like Kenya was somehow present in that embrace, like the connection between the two women, one who didn't survive and one who did, was something real and permanent that no one could take away. Tony Lee did not let the loss of his daughter become the end of the story. He created a foundation in Kenya's name, dedicated to supporting families of the missing. The ones navigating a system that told them to wait, to be patient, to trust a process that had already failed his family once. He fought to change the laws that had tied his hands in those critical early hours. And he spoke about his daughter the way she deserved to be spoken about. Not as a victim, as a person who mattered. As a young woman whose death, in the most painful way imaginable, had gone on to protect other lives. He said it himself. Her death has changed a lot of girls' lives. We are absolutely positive she has saved lives out there. And Lydia Tillman rebuilt herself from the ground up. She became a yoga instructor, an activist, a woman who took everything that had been done to her and chose, deliberately and defiantly, to become the opposite of it. She said that Travis Forbes had acted out of fear and hatred, and that she chose love and peace instead. She said she won, and she did. This case was about more than one man's capacity for violence. It was about a system that asked a father to wait while his daughter was already gone. It was about the gaps in surveillance, the gaps in legislation, the gaps that predators learn to move through when they understand the rules better than the people trying to enforce them. It was about a detective who refused to let the absence of evidence become the end of the pursuit. It was about a father who searched dumpsters alone in the dark because the alternative was doing nothing. And it was about two women, one who never made it home from a Friday night out, and one who threw herself out of a burning building rather than let him win, both of whom deserved infinitely better than what that night delivered to them. There is one more thing worth saying before this ends. In jail, before the full weight of his sentence came down, Travis Forbes told investigators that he wanted to confess, that he needed to confess, that there were more out there. More victims, more stories that had not yet surfaced. He never elaborated, he never gave names or details, and that thread has never been fully pulled. Which means that for some families somewhere, this chapter may not be closed at all. Kanaya Monge was 19 years old. She wanted to work in television. She loved her family. She barely drank. She went out on a Friday night to dance with her friends and unwind after a long week. She deserved to come home.